Yo, what's up, a-holes? Welcome back to the Holistic A-Hole YouTube channel. Today we're talking all about fertility and falling United States fertility rates and why that is not necessarily a good thing. So I got the idea to do this video off a story that was released in the most honest news publication of all time. Bam! The New York Times fertility rate in U.S. hit a record low in 2018. So this is a big deal. This is actually a real big deal because not only, as you'll see in this article, have the U.S. fertility rates fallen in just 2018, but they've been on a steady decline really over the last, 10 to 20 years or so. And you'll see in the article, they paint a lot of the reasons why. A lot of it is due to the fact that people are holding off, specifically women are holding off having babies till much later in life than they used to. There used to be a time where it was normal for a woman to have, several babies before she was even 21 years old. And now, that's changed. That's changed so much. Many women are waiting till their mid to late 20s to have babies. Many women are waiting until their 30s. And a lot of women are even waiting till their late 30s, early 40s to have women. Women are waiting to have women. Women are waiting to have babies, which is, look, in terms of fertility numbers, yeah, that doesn't look great. But in terms of the overall benefits to society and how it helps women contribute more to society, this is fantastic news, So let's talk a little bit about this article and then dive into some of the specifics. The rate of births fell again last year, according to new government data, extending a lengthy decline as women wait until they are older to have children. Yes, they are. The fertility rate in the United States fell in 2018 for the fourth straight year, extending a steep decline in births that began in 2008 with the Great Recession, the federal government said on Wednesday. There were 59.1 births for every 1,000 women of childbearing age in the country last year, a record low according to the National Center for Health Statistics. The rate was down by 2% from the previous year and has fallen by about 15% since 2007. So, it's not surprising that when the Great Recession hit in 2007, that this altered birth rates, along with many other, what we considered normal human behaviors. Before 2007, we all had this ideal vision of the American dream, which was get married, buy a house, have your 2 kids, and then, work your same job for 30, 40 years. And then at 65, you slide seamlessly into retirement. And then you get Medicare and Social Security. And if you were smart, your 401k paying you off until you die, which was an average age of somewhere between, 83 and 90 somewhere. But in 2007, everything changed. Because in 2007, that's when the whole myth of the safest investment in the United States being real estate, this whole idealistic vision of getting married and then having a baby and buying a house, it all seems so realistic. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, that wasn't a problem. Back when, you could buy a 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood for a reasonable price and get a 30-year mortgage and have it not tax your entire, a substantial amount of your monthly earnings. That's not the case anymore. Housing prices and the money supply in general is completely overinflated. Not to mention, look, as a child of the 80s and the 90s, who came from a statistical family where, it was a one-parent household because another parent left, and that happens, in basically 50% of marriages. People are smarter now. People aren't running to get married. It's not the 1950s in that ideal world of, hey, we're going to find a wife, we're going to invite her to the dance, and I'm going to marry my high school sweetheart, and we're going to start our lives before we're 25 years old. It just doesn't happen anymore. People are single much longer. People are dating much longer. People don't want to get married, mostly because they saw the nightmare that their parents went through in getting a divorce. What man wants to work a job after he's slaved away in college and then starts slaving away in a job that he hates, only to marry a woman who then they get divorced less than 5 years later and then loses half their stuff, right? No man wants that. And then on the other side, women are much smarter too. They go, look, these guys are assholes. These guys are losers. These women are like, I'm smarter than that guy. Women are like, I'm smarter than most men. Why do I want to lock myself down when there's probably much better men that are out of my league right now that I can work my way into their league who want me? I'm jacked. I'm stacked. I got pussy. I got crack. What do I, it's like women are smarter now, right? So this is the consequence of the world we live in. Not to mention, man, Jesus Christ, everything is sexualized in our culture. You know how hard it is to be, how hard it is to be married when there's, just porn everywhere, either on porn sites or just, out there in the world, all over the media. Sex sells. All the movies are sexy. All the TV shows are sexy. The goddamn news is sexy. Have you seen Fox News? There's nothing less than a 10.5 woman there telling you about why immigrants are coming to the country illegally, raping everybody and murdering everybody. This is the world we live in. So, of course, the birth rate's going down. In all, there were 3,791,712 births in the country last year, the center said in its release of the final birth data for 2018. Fertility rates are essential measures of a society's demographic balance. If they are very high, resources like housing and education can be strained by a flood of children, as happened in the post-war baby boom years. If they are too low, a country may find itself with too few young people to replace its workforce and support its elderly, as in Russia and Japan today. That's not necessarily a bad thing because, as we know, the workforce, the jobs here are all going away. The typical workforce that, my parents and your parents worked, from the 1940s up until, just recently, those jobs are for the most part exported to China and India anyways. So, of course, we're not going to replace our parents in the workforce because we got different jobs now. My dad never drove for Uber. My dad never was an IT guy. There was no like fiber optic cables that needed to be managed, and what is that like software specialization? It's like, no, our parents worked in factories and worked for old companies and worked in manufacture. They're not getting the jobs that kids now are getting, which is in Bitcoin trading and startups. There's no startups. A startup was like a gas station back in the 1970s, 1980s when our parents. So yeah, of course, replacing people in the workforce is not a huge deal right now for our generation because, quite frankly, those jobs just aren't there anyways. So we have to create our own jobs, which is what's essentially happening right now. So that point, I understand what it's saying. I guess the thing with this whole report anyways is it's like they're talking about numbers in terms of what the traditional numbers would be. But you got to understand, New York Times, I know this is hard for you to grasp, but the world today is not the same world as it was 20, 30 years ago. As much as you want it to be, you're part of the reason why it's not. It's just not. In the United States, declines in fertility have not led to drops in population, in part because immigration has helped offset them. The country has been living through one of the longest declines in fertility in decades. Demographers are trying to determine whether it's a temporary phenomenon or a new normal driven by deeper social change. Fertility rates tend to drop during difficult economic times as people put off having babies and then rise when the economy rebounds. This is what happened during and after the Great Depression of the 1930s. But this time around, the birth rate has not recovered with the economy. A brief uptick in the rate in 2014 did not last. So, as we just discussed, yes, people are having less babies because men and women are starting their lives much later than they used to. 60 years ago, it wasn't uncommon for a guy 19 or 20 to marry the woman who he had been with in high school. Or maybe you go off to college and your freshman year, you meet a girl and then you're married maybe just after college. But those days are done, those days are over, right? Because of the social pressures, of course, the social influence. But look, here's, you know what? Let me read this part and then we'll talk about that. It is hard for me to believe that the birth rate just keeps going down, said Kenneth Johnson, a demographer at the University of New Hampshire. Mr. Johnson estimated that if the birth rate had remained steady at its 2000 level, there would have been 5.7 million more births in the country since then. The decline in 2018 was broad, sweeping through nearly all age groups and reflected a long, gradual shift in American childbearing to later in the mother's life. The rate fell most steeply among women in their teens, down 7.4% from the year before. Births to teenagers have fallen by more than 70% since 1991. Yo, New York Times, that is a good thing. That is a good statistic. How often do I have to hear about these problems with, socio-economic problems with people on welfare and young people having babies out of wedlock and kids growing up in single-parent homes raised by teenage mothers? This is not a good thing. The fact that births to teenagers have fallen since 70% since 1991. That is an amazing statistic, which, look, as broken as our education system is here, as broken as our society is here in America, the fact that teenagers are having less babies, especially considering, how difficult it is for someone to raise a baby, even with a steady income, that is a fantastic statistic. Women in their 20s had fewer babies last year as well. Historically, women in their late 20s usually had the highest fertility rates of all, but they were overtaken in 2016 by women in their early 30s, reflecting a trend of later childbearing throughout American society. The only age groups that recorded increases in fertility rates in 2018 were women in their late 30s and early 40s. Yes, so this is what's happening. We now understand the way that lifestyle factors, especially including health and nutrition and diet, can affect your fertility, right? It used to be back when I was in my 20s and I was dating girls back then that they all thought they had to have babies before they were the age of 30, right? Their biological clock said, when you hit 30, you cannot have kids anymore. Right? And before that, their parents, their mothers, thought that number was 25 or 22, okay? But now we know because so many women now are having babies well into their 30s, and a lot of women are having babies in their early 40s. So it's not to say that it's any easier as you get older to have a kid. In fact, I believe it's much harder. But the idea, this little picture that we've painted of a biological clock ticking and ticking and ticking, is not exactly how it works. The fact is that the reason it's so difficult, or it's much more difficult to have a baby as you get older, is, for women, first of all, it has to do with hormones, it has to do with your progesterone, it has to do with estrogen, it has to do with, your female organs. And for men, we often leave men out of the equation on this, but a lot of infertility is due to men's inability to actually have semen that is functional. A lot of men don't have sperm that swim, don't have sperm that's even viable. Some men's sperm is just dead on arrival. So a lot of women get the blame for the fertility problem, but in fact, a lot of it is because of men. And the problem with men is men traditionally were subject to more toxic work environments. Back in the day, it used to be because men used to work in the mines, right? And more manufacturing plants, so they're subject to more toxic chemical exposure. So, a lot of time, and then men were more likely to smoke cigarettes, more likely to drink, and more likely to have, a highly processed food diet. So all of these confounding factors essentially would make your semen of much lower quality. And for years, we just completely ignored that. We put it on the women. But now what we're realizing, now that men and women are finding more finding more information about fixing lifestyles, is that a lot of people are using these shifts in lifestyle towards healthier diets and nutrition and better education to be able to fix things like adrenal fatigue and enhanced detoxification to essentially make their reproductive fertility much, much more effective. So that all being said, in 2018, 2019, we now know that it's not about a biological clock. In fact, it's not really at all about a biological clock. It's about keeping the organs and keeping your body that makes the things to make a baby in the first place, keeping those things healthy and running well. It's clear that the traditional age fertility pattern that held for baby boomers and Gen X is shifting, said William. He noted that more than half of women who had children in their late 30s last year had college degrees, according to the new data, a much larger proportion than among women who had children in their late 20s. That could be a clue that deeper social forces are at work. A generation of millennial women appear to be delaying having children even longer than Gen X women and baby boomers did to get a firm on to get on a firm footing professionally and financially before starting. Before starting a family. The data suggests that people want to establish themselves before having children, said Allison Gemmell, a demographer at Johns Hopkins University. They also want to make sure they have adequate resources to raise quality children. Yeah. Nobody wants to struggle. Nobody wants to struggle. I mean, if there's one thing you 100% have control over, I get it. You don't have control over your genes. You might not have control over your cravings. You might not have control over some of your socio-economic situations. But if there's one thing you have control over, it is to procreate or to not procreate. You don't have to have a baby. You have 100% control over that situation. So if you know, and we all do know, that if you have a baby, it's going to cost a lot of money, and you say, well, I'm in a situation where I don't have enough money, but if I give myself 5 to 10 years, I can be in a situation where I have more money, and I know that I have to buy children shit like toys and cribs and strollers and car seats, and I got to buy them food, and I got to basically, use tens of thousands of dollars a year to keep this kid alive. Yeah, you might want to hold off until you have the money to be able to successfully do that. It's hard enough to put food in your own mouth. It's going to be a little harder to keep putting food in your mouth and then to put food in a little monster's mouth. Yeah, it's kind of a smart move to recognize that. I got to give it up to Americans, man. We fail on a lot of shit, but look, this holding off to have babies thing is actually quite helpful. Other sweeping social changes have accompanied the delay in childbearing. New data from the Census Bureau show that the median age of the first marriage is now 28 for women and nearly 30 for men. In 1970, the median ages were 21 and 23. See, that's exactly what I'm saying. This is a far cry from the 1950s or even the 1980s or 1990s. The fertility decline may seem alarming, Professor Gemmell said, but a lot about it is good. Teen pregnancy is way down, as are unintended pregnancies, which had long set the United States apart from other developed countries. She noted that American women generally do have children eventually, and that childlessness is waning. By her mid-40s, a typical woman has had 2 children, she said. Is it a permanent shift? We just don't know yet. It is, she said. There might be implications for society at large, say for funding Social Security, but I don't think we are there yet. Yeah, this is the world we live in now. Women are smarter, I forget the book I read, but it was all about, ways to help the climate change situation. And one of it was to educate younger women about having kids. Because if women are are holding off to later in life to have kids, that helps the whole resource allocation situation, right? The United States statistics, right, they might equal out because of immigration, but that's who we are. And in fact, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That probably could be considered a real good thing, the fact that we're still taking in immigrants while having less babies. So we have more people to help us do more stuff versus just, little resource fucking consumers that are just eating up all the food, and we got to make them genetically modified food. Not to mention, kids nowadays are sicker than ever. So, we have all these hospital and doctor resources. So the part of the story I take from this is fertility is going down, or the amount of babies we have in the country is going down because women are smarter. But it's also going down because people might not actually physically be able to make babies because the fertility in the country is what do you say? It's going down because the fertility in this country is starting to become poisoned. It's becoming harder to have babies because of the toxic exposure and the deficiencies, the defects, because of the defects in both male and female reproductive systems. So that's the story of fertility in this country. Let me know what you think. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Do you see the context and the nuance in these arguments? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Also, please remember to subscribe to the channel and smash that like button because you know you love the video. And please share this with everyone you know and love. I will catch you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.